Hello, I wanted to go ahead and make this video covering the 814XL Canon Super 8 camera. Specifically, the issue that we are going to be covering in this video is with the FPS dial. I have seen people report issues with this dial from forums, Reddit, YouTube, and it doesn't really seem like there's a solid answer on what generally is the cause of it and if there is a fix. So I went ahead and tore down my two cameras and determined what the issue was exactly. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing you're going to want to do here is remove this top screw. Getting to this screw is kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. I was using two small bits from my iFixit kit that can go into each one of the hole and then just twist it with my hand. And then I just loosen the rest of it with my screwdriver. Next, there's three hidden screws underneath these leather covers. The first one is on the top right hand side, right here where I'm peeling up. So I used my heat gun to heat it up and then peeled up that leather strip to expose the screw back there. Make sure to be gentle when trying to pry up that leather if you're trying to keep your leather intact. Next, there's two screws on the back of the camera. Both are in spots where I'm heating up right now. You'll see this is sped up footage. So definitely take your time on trying to pry that up, but eventually you can get it. These screws also have these little copper washers. I think they're copper. They're like a gold color anyways, but um, they sometimes like to stay in the hole. I would probably recommend pulling them out like I am here with my needles. Next thing you're going to want to do is take off the eye cup. There's only 4 screws inside the eye cup that are holding it down. Not too hard of a process. And then once you get those removed, you should be able to just pull the eye cup up. Next, there are 2 screws on the side, right on the front side of the camera. And again, these have those washers inside them. So try to hold on to those, put them with your screws. Now that you got all the screws removed, you should be able to lift up the cover of the viewfinder. There is sometimes a washer right here. It's on one of my cameras and not on the other. I don't think it's super important. Just take note of it, and if it is there, try not to lose it. When I first took this off, this camera was having issues with the zoom buttons. I knew it was just a contact issue because they would sometimes work and sometimes not up top. So I'm just quickly cleaning those contacts with there. Now I am heating up the bottom of the camera. There are some pads you're going to have to lift up on. There's a rubber pad and a Canon metal plate that you're going to have to peel up. So right now I am prying that rubber up from the bottom, as you can see here. Take your time peeling this up. You don't want to tear that rubber. It definitely is old. For our case here, we really only need to peel up one side of that to expose the 3 screws plus the front screw, just like how I showed you there. To take out those 4 screws, there'll be 3 on the top side there and 1 on the bottom that holds in the front trigger button cover. Once you get those out, you should be able to pull out that cover. It might be a little tight depending on the camera. One of my cameras, it comes out really easily, and the other one, it's in there pretty stiff. So if you want to try to pry it out, I have a little plastic pry there I tried for a second. Otherwise, it should come out with a little bit of work. All right, now we need to take off this bottom metal plate. Now, when you pry this up, you almost definitely will bend it. But once you get it off, you just bend it back into place and try to make it look straight so it sits flush when we glue this back down later. Now, underneath this plate, there's 4 screws, but in our case, we just need to remove 2 of the screws that would allow us to remove this top cover. Now, the next screw you're going to take out is this little stubby screw right above the FPS dial. This is probably the shortest screw, so just take note and try to keep all your screws in order here, but this one specifically is a short screw. Now we need to take off the manual aperture dial. This dial can be a pain in the butt to get off a little bit. Basically in the middle of the dial, there is a set screw and you need an H bit in order to get it out. Now, the closest thing I could find was a SP10 bit. And in my case, that still did not fit. I had to take my grinder and grind off the inside of the bit in order to make it fit here. Now you're going to want to hold onto the dial with a pair of pliers and then slowly turn that set screw. Be very careful not to bend that dial. Once you get that screw out, the dial will be stuck in place. It looks like they put some glue and or something else underneath originally. So I'm using both my plastic pry tools to pry that button, the dial up. We need to take out this front screw, the front of the camera, right above the trigger. I would recommend pulling this rubber flap out. It gives you a little bit more room to pull that screw. Now we need to take apart this middle dial. So there's a leather cover that needs to come off. Once you get that off, there's a little hole that you need to put some kind of sharp object in to then pry the plastic piece out. It is glued into place. Now there are 3 screws along with a center screw that is the flathead in the middle you see there. Getting all 3 of the screws out can be kind of a pain sometimes, and also take note of the orientation of the dial, because you'll have to put that in the same position when you put those screws back in. Now that you got those screws removed, you should be able to just lift this dial right out of place. And now that we have all the screws out of this front cover, it should lift up freely. Now you can see the dial right here. This is the FPS dial that sometimes breaks. There's 3 copper pins that makes contact with the board. And in my case, on one of my cameras, the pin became detached from the dial. You take out 2 screws holding the board into place. And then you are going to want to unsolder both these connections here, the red and the green wire. This will give you enough room to pull the board out of place without unsoldering all the cables. Now on the back of the dial, you'll see these plastic clips. Please be very careful with these clips. Depending on the environment that this camera was in, these plastic clips can be very brittle and break. Inside those clips, there is a plastic piece holding them into place right here. It is glued down, so you have to break the glue and then you can pull the plastic piece out. Once that's done, you should be able to bend the teeth just enough to pull the dial out of place. In my case here, one of the pins just fell out, and so I'm gluing it back into place. I went ahead and used some JB Weld Clear Weld, which is a quick setting epoxy. Make sure you get it aligned exactly how it was before. You should be able to see markings on the dial and just line it up. Once the glue is cured, go ahead and pop it back into place. And then go ahead and put your white centerpiece back into the back. And we're just going to go ahead and put a small dab of glue right in the back of that dial again. Now we put the 2 screws back into place on the board. And then we solder our wires back down into place. The red wire and the green wire. Now that we got that soldered back into place, we need to align the dials so that the dial on the camera cover aligns with what's on the board. So take a look at your cover of your camera and then position the dials on the board appropriately. If you set it correctly, it should fall pretty easily into place. So here's an alternate fix that I had to apply to one of my cameras. For this camera, the copper contact was no longer in the dial itself. So what I ended up doing instead is taking the contact that is meant for the 9 FPS dial and moved it to the 18 FPS slot on the plastic dial itself. I then went ahead and soldered both wires for the 9 FPS contacts together so that the camera was always in 9 FPS mode. It's required for the 9 FPS contacts to be connected in order for 18 FPS to work on this camera. With repositioning these contacts on the dial, this camera can now only do 9 FPS and 18 FPS, which is perfectly fine. The next problem I had with this camera was the plastic brittle teeth on the back of the dial broke as soon as I touched them. So what I ended up doing was gluing the dial directly on the cover of the camera right behind the FPS dial itself. So the only thing applying pressure now to those pins is the screws of the cover of the camera. This is not an ideal fix, but as of right now, I have no other way to repair this camera. So we will just have to see how it holds up over time. But as you can see here, it works just fine. So now for the reassembly. Make sure you line up your dials for what they're set on the board along with what's set on the actual cover. They need to be properly aligned with each other. Next, you also need to set that red button for checking power on the camera. You just need to set it back into place in the cover. Then go ahead and start putting your screws back into place. Here's that small little stubby screw I was talking about before. Now let's install the middle dial again. Set that center screw. And then set the 3 screws on the outside. And again, make sure this dial is in the same position it was in when you took out the screws in the first place. Next, let's set the aperture, the manual aperture dial. This will align in there. There are grooves for it to fit into. And then go ahead and use that H bit again. I tightened it by hand and then I pulled out the pliers to tighten it snug. Don't go too extreme on it, just tight enough to not have it fall out. And go ahead and put in the screws on the bottom of the camera underneath the metal cover area. And then let's go ahead and put down that plastic piece again. If you want to glue that back into place or use some kind of light adhesive, and then put the leather cover back on. Now take note of this metal plate back here. Just make sure it's facing the right direction. It has moved on me a couple times. Now go ahead and put on the top cover of the camera again. You'll have to go into the viewfinder a little bit or it'll feed through as you see there. And then go ahead and push down the W button to have it fall down into place. It sometimes gets caught on that W button there. Now go ahead and put in the rest of the screws you have. Don't forget about the washers that should be for each screw. The screws right now that I'm putting into the sides do have washers. All right, now go ahead and put in the top screw of the cover there. Again, you're going to have to use like 2 bits or some kind of pointed object to get it tight. And then we'll go ahead and put in the screws underneath our leather covers. Again, these screws have washers with them. Now we'll go ahead and put the eye cup back on. Go ahead and just insert the 4 screws and make sure it's lined up how it should be. Next, let's go ahead and put the screw in that's right above the trigger. Go and pull that rubber cupping out again. Just gives you more room to get into that screw hole area. Next, we'll go ahead and put your trigger cover back into place. This slides underneath that plastic piece there, as you can see. And then we'll go ahead and put our 4 screws back into place underneath this rubber cover. Next, we'll go ahead and put that metal plate back down. It's as straight as I can make it. If you want to go ahead and try to clean off some of the old glue off of it, and then rub it down with some rubbing alcohol as well. And then go ahead and apply some adhesive underneath all these covers. So here are both my cameras. As you can see, this is the first one, normal repair. Just had to glue that copper pin back into place. It does full 18, 9, and 1 FPS now. Works exactly how it should. And here's the second camera I was showing, where it now only has 2 copper pins inside it. So it can only do 9 FPS and 18 FPS mode. If I set it to 1, it still does just 9. Because I soldered the 2 contacts together for the 9 FPS dial. But as you can see, both cameras have now been repaired and are both functional again. Thanks for watching. I hope this helped you if you have a Canon 814XL or a similar camera model. Best of luck with repairing your camera, and reach out if you have any questions. We'll see ya and have a good day.